Hey guys, welcome to how to paint a Wood Elves Wildwood Ranger. Here's your paint list. After doing a dual prime with Stynylrez black, gray, and white, so that would be a triple prime. So we start with a black base coat, 45 degrees with gray, and then white from above, just to give me an idea where the details are. I airbrush this mix of scarlet red, charred brown, and black. So it says 2-2-1. Basically I did 10 drops of the red and brown and then 5 drops of black. For freehand, I decided to use fountain pens. I'll put a link below where you can get them. Then we take some dead white and add just a little bit of skin wash ink, some water, and drying retarder. Even a little bit of alcohol just to help with the capillary action to run through these pens. And then you just dip the pen and make dots. I switched to the larger pen just to block in the lines connecting the dots. Now we use a really small brush in the same mix and try to sharpen the points and just generally clean up the light areas. And now we take black and fix anything that you might have messed up on. A line that's not completely straight. And this is where you can kind of sharpen your shapes. And depending on what color cloak you decide to use, if you're going to use this technique on another model, is use the base coat. I know that we're going to go over this with inks and that the black won't really show. Alright, now we take some skin wash ink, thinned about 1:1 with airbrush thinner, and slowly build it up. I went a little crazy with it. I'm trying to focus the ink on the front side of the hood and then also on the back at the very bottom, and I darkened it quite a bit, so there's going to be a lot of back and forth re-highlighting, spraying ink, re-highlighting, spraying ink. So since it was too dark, this is what we're doing, is just going back and trying to highlight some of those areas that I want to bring back. Now very carefully take the skin wash and the airbrush and try to blend those highlights back in with the rest of the design. I wanted to change the shadow color since it was basically just black mixed with the base coat. So I decided, okay, let's take some violet ink, thin that down, and spray from below the model. This significantly made the design darker. We're gonna have to go back, re-highlight, and blend it again. Now since we did the shadow, it's time to highlight, and for pretty much almost any color you can use sunny skin tone thinned down. It works out pretty well. So that's what I did here. It's about 10 parts water to 1 part paint, and just lay it on very thin. Position the model in the light so that you can see when the surface gets wet, because if not, you're just gonna spray. If you're trying to look for the color change, you'll sit there and spray until you see it, you know, running down the model, and it's too much. So here I'm doing a comparison. On the left is the model that we've been working on, and on the right was my test model. And as you can see, the test model is a little bit lighter. I actually like the design on the test model. a bit better, but I also didn't have a camera in front of my face. Now we're gonna try to blend the sunny skin tone because it looked a little bit too dusty, so I thinned the skin wash ink down a little bit more and just kind of sprayed it over the highlight areas to get it to look a little bit less dusty. So yeah, after comparing it to the test model, it was definitely a bit too dark for my taste, so we're highlighting again. And when you're done highlighting this again, just spray the skin wash to kind of blend it in. Now to do those light orange parts. So now we're going to do those light orange parts using heavy orange, and this is Vallejo's foundation style paint, like a very easy coverage paint. I thinned it down a bit, so that's why the coverage doesn't look too hot, but this is a nice color to base for orange. It's like a bright orange mixed with white, so it gives it this pumpkin-y look, which fits the autumn look of these Wildwood Rangers. And we're basing the inside of the cloak, and it's like the second layer of clothing underneath. It's just showing on their knees a little bit. And then we're also going to do the mask. Alright, for the freehand, we're going to use our trusty fountain pens again, and we're going to do the same mix, just kind of like what we did with the other stuff, except for the ink is really thin by itself, whereas when we were doing the freehand on the back of the cloak, it was, you know, white paint or mostly a white paint and then a little bit of that skin ink. So I probably thinned mine a little too much, where, you know, when I touched the surface, the ink was flowing so good off of the fountain pen that it kind of puddled up. Be mindful of that, not to thin it too much, or else you start to sacrifice control at that point. But if you mess around on like a piece of plastic, don't try it on a piece of paper, because of course on a piece of paper it's gonna act fine. A piece of paper is very different to a painted surface, so practice that a little bit. Don't worry about messing up either, because I mean, we did a foundation paint here. It'll cover up pretty easy if we make any mistakes. Now those red lines we did with the ink are kind of like guides. As you can see, the color's not completely uniform. It's kind of faded in areas where the ink was thinner, darker in areas where it was thicker. So we're going to take this bloody red here and just kind of give it all one color. Go over everything. And this is also where you will sharpen the shapes and whatnot. Getting to the cloak between the legs, I tapped against the boots a bit, so we're just going to take that base coat color of scarlet red, charred brown, and black and rebase the boots and anything else that needs to be that color that we might have a little bit of paint on. Alright, now for the top layer of clothing, we will use heavy khaki, which is kind of a weird color. Like, it looks very olive. When it dries, it kind of goes more towards the cream color, kind of. I don't know too many of my paints that do that, but for some reason this paint does that. So as I put it on, it looks very green, which still kind of works. But I was trying to closely match what the box art was showing me, mixing that with colors that kind of look interesting to me. I thought, hey, this is a good medium tone. For the shadows, we use a mix of the heavy khaki and beastie brown. And the trick with layering with a brush, or not layering, is glazing it down, is you're trying to start from like the medium highlight area and drag the paint towards the shadow, because wherever your brush stops, that's where the paint usually builds up. So the idea is to pull the paint towards wherever you want it. So for the shadows, we start from the medium area, pull into the shadow areas, and then for highlights, you do the opposite. You start from the median areas and you drag your brush towards the hot spots. So we mix heavy khaki and bone white for the highlight 1-to-1. Just like I said, we're gonna drag from the medium areas into the highlights, slowly build up our gradient. I almost didn't paint the face because there's such a little bit of it showing, like the bridge of the nose, and the rest of the face is, you know, back inside the cloak. So I was like, you know, there's a shadow there, but it was bugging me, so I decided to take dwarf skin and just kind of puddle it up in there to give it some kind of color. And then I noticed, oh wow, I'm totally painting the inside of the cloak with that. So let's take black and clean it up. And then once that was dry, I used a flesh tone shade, just kind of puddled that in there just to give that skin color. So now we're going to edge highlight using dark flesh tone. Try using the side of the brush for this rather than the tip. So now we mix heavy orange with the dark flesh tone, and we get our second edge highlight. And this will be for our bright spots. Now we paint the gold areas using the Model Air Gold. So here we go, skin washing. That'll give your gold that really nice warm color that people like. But you also get the advantages of the Model Air metallics being super nice to paint on by hand. It's like, reminds me of those like silver paint pens that you could get. And once the wash is dry, we come back with the gold and highlight all the scales and edges of stuff. Alright, and one of my favorite things to use for shading pretty much anything, any color, is the Colonial Violet pigment from Earth Pigments. It is fantastic. I'm just applying it dry here. It's kind of like when we use the glazing technique for using a brush, is you're kind of mashing the pigment into the medium shadow area, and then you're wiping the pigment off the brush and blending it. See, girls who do makeup will kind of know the technique, but that's pretty much how you do it. Is you put it into the shadows in mid area, and then you basically blend the line with a clean brush. Not a wet brush, but a clean brush that's just not loaded with pigment. You'll see me work it back and forth, and I don't know why I kept dragging the model down towards the bottom of the screen, sorry. Now for the arms. I left these off just to make it easier to paint. Alright, after the base coats were done, I decided to glue the arms on and start doing the highlighting. And we're using elf skin tone mixed with dwarf skin. And it's just your general highlighting. You're trying to hit the upper areas and don't completely cover up the base coat. And then for the final highlight, just add a drop of pale flesh to the previous mix. Oh yeah, before I glued them together, I base coated the handle of their sword knife thingy with scarlet red, and then I'm doing the first highlights with vermilion from Model Color. And now we do the final highlight using scarlet, also from Model Color. Now we base coat all the metal areas on the sword. We're just going to call it a sword from right now. With gunmetal. And gunmetal is very nice. If you don't have gunmetal, you can mix like a medium silver with black. We loaded some black into the airbrush, and we're gonna carefully work some shadow areas here on the blade. Silly putty was used for masking. Now we take silver and we're going to do the cutting edge of the blade and some highlights. And the final thing that I've been doing to my models is doing the black lining. And that's just kind of going through the details with a very fine paintbrush, thinned black paint or black ink, making those definite lines between a change of materials, like from where a boot might end and pants start, or where the cloth is different. Kind of a comic book look, but I like that on these. That's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.